So I thought it would be useful to begin today by doing a bit of a reheat from a couple weeks ago, having to do with the law of four, because we got some depth in it, but there's a whole lot more to kind of consider. Okay, so do you recall the two primary bars that we had set out? I'm not doing, any padre file, not doing that, but we had two bars, yes. One bar, the vertical one. Do you remember what that was called as far as a foundational goes?
I can remember that we had hot and cold and wet and
Ah,
dry.
yeah, that's right. So we started off with hot and cold spot. And then we have wet and dry. Yeah, little off. Apologies on the cross there, but you get the idea, yeah? And then what this did was it created a couple more vectors, didn't it? So hot and dry being as far as air, earth, water, or fire. Hot and dry was fire. Yeah, fire. Dry and cold was earth. Wet and cold, water. And wet and warm, air. Yeah, do you remember all that?
Yeah.
All right. Now, what I want to talk about is the shift, and I'll get to the shift in just a little bit, all right? Because the law of four or the law of two, when it intersects with itself, creates this kind of solar cross of patterns in there. But from their perspective, it's two more intersections of the law of two, you see? And so the result, like fire and water become opposites, air and earth become opposites, and then it can then translate into more aspects of things. Okay, so we'll get into that. We also talked about the bull, bird, lion, and serpent. Now, do you remember which goes with which here? So,
Lime. Wait, lime goes with fire.
right, let me write that here. So, fire is lion. Excellent. What's next?
Um, I think bull was earth.
Right. Okay. Water.
Bird,
Huh?
um, hang on.
Was the serpent, I think.
Serpent. Yep.
Yes.
I'll put snake because it's shorter. And then, of course, air. I'm going to put eagle this time for air. All right. And so these are other attributions that go to it. Now, um, let's talk a bit about the symbology of things. All right. Because if you go through ancient art and ancient you'll see it around like old churches and these things like griffins and these things. You know what I'm saying, right? You'll see this especially in like Gothic cathedrals, for example, implement this type of art pretty extensively in there. And I want to talk about first of all the symbol of the snake in the bowl because it has a relationship to who knows what that's supposed to be. Can you tell? It's semen. Okay, semen. Um, and very curiously, you can go back through there's a certain Egyptian stela or what do they call it? What's it called? A petroglyph, yes, that has an image, and I can't remember which pharaoh it is, but has an image of the pharaoh ejaculating, and you can actually see coming out of the penis, you can see these images of sperm, the way that we would see them under a microscope. It makes you curious to wonder how they knew, what that looked like. Very, very curious. Obviously, they knew. And so if you can accept that, and of course there's alternate explanations to it, perhaps one of those alternate explanations is true, but does look for the world like they knew what that was. Yeah. And so if you can accept that they knew a couple thousand plus years ago about that symbol for semen, then you can make the very short leap to think that perhaps they knew that that was, or they symbolized that via the snake. Okay, so we'll say semen for snake. And then they drew the Apis bull. Kind of like that. Can you see that? It's got two horns going like this, and the head coming down like that. It's actually where we get the letter A from. I'll do it here. So here's our modern letter A. Yeah. But it used to be an upside down like this. And you can see how the two horns became that, and just over the centuries, they sort of flipped it around. It's the first letter in the alphabet because the Apis bull was what they considered the first primordial god or first primordial being. Okay, so bit of history there on our own letter A. What does if snake represents semen, or yeah, if snake represents semen, what does the Apis bull symbol up there remind you of?
Like
If it occurs
uterus,
to you, don't be shy. All right. I've said the word
the
semen.
uterus, maybe.
Huh?
Uterus.
Yeah, the uterus. Absolutely right. If you kind of draw an outline around it, let's see if it's kind of small, isn't it? But yeah, you get this sort of shape there, obviously with the opening and all that type of stuff. But yeah, like a uterus. Okay, so now you've got this uh, convergence of symbology. You've got the ecology in the form of the uterus or the new life appearing that is really in waiting, isn't it? Right. And then you've got the penis that ejaculates sperm into the uterus and it creates the physical foundation for something. Now, if you look at this diagram here that we drew before, you'll notice that serpent or snake and bull are both on the lower half. Pardon me. The lower half of that physical cross there. All right, they both occur down there, curiously enough. And if you look at what is on top, then you've got eagle and lion. And we'll get into that in just a little bit here. But I want you to kind of get the idea that the snake and bull represent the physical aspects of something, right? The body generates that body aspect. Now, we talked about the idea of aggregation and confirmation, didn't we? And really, the best way to explain the aggregation and confirmation is if you look at the genesis of a cell. When the sperm enters the egg, yeah, they're both kind of smaller, but when the sperm enters the egg, it begins a process of expansion, doesn't it? It starts to enlarge, and then it pops off into two. So you've got aggregation, it aggregates, and then breaks off into two. It confirms itself. And then those two begin to aggregate and break off into 4 and 16 and 32 and so on and so forth as you get that. So you begin already at the very start of life to get this aggregation and confirmation aspect of things. I want you to understand too that we're not just talking about this scenario. Okay, we're trying to open up the laws in a certain way so that you can begin to apply them across multiple domains. Yeah? If you want to understand the process of a personal development journey, for example, then you can take this idea of aggregation and confirmation as a template for that sort of thing. Yeah? We begin to, like you're doing now, you begin to aggregate this body of knowledge having to do having to do with the law of four. And this is the aggregation phase of things. Yeah? And then I say, okay, go find examples of it, and you split out into confirmation. Right? You've got this idea, this aggregated notion of the law of four within yourself. It's hot, cold, wet, dry, bull, bird, lion, serpent, and whatnot. That's part of you. To confirm it, you go outside of yourself. You look at things in nature, for example, you look at the four seasons, which very easily you can find in there. Yeah. You know the four seasons as they apply to here? Let's go through it. Just we'll aggregate you a little bit more, okay? And then you can find your own examples. But hot and dry, summer.
Summer, yeah.
Dry and cold, autumn or fall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wet and cold, winter. And wet and warm,
Spring.
spring. Yeah, exactly. So it really does go everywhere. And looking at nature is a great place to start to begin that confirmation phase of things. You can even look at sicknesses. You know, sometimes you have a hot and dry cough, like a cough with a fever, don't you? Sometimes you have dry and cold, where you've got a cough and chills. Mm-hmm. And cold and wet, you have a phlegmy cough and chills, and the warm, warm and wet. You get the idea, don't you? That it's not just one thing. Really, you can pretty much find this sort of thing anywhere. All right. So is this aspect clear?
Yes.
Something aggregating in you about it, and I really do hope that you take this. I wouldn't call it homework, maybe life work, okay, or groundwork if you prefer. But we do hope that you take this to heart and begin to try to do this process of confirmation for yourself. It's a very important aspect of this journey, is not to just listen to the I would call myself an inspirator, and you are conspirators. Yeah, understand the difference, right? I'm trying to cause inspiration, and if you've got the reference for CON, or carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, conspiration means that you've got an inner process going. Yeah, so I'm trying to inspire, and you need to get that get that inspiration in yourselves. So I'll be an inspirator from now on. You're conspirators, not to a crime, but all right. So yeah, kind of making sense so far. Got these couple of symbols in here. Now we know the idea of male and female. We know the idea of creating a physical body, because we all have one. And I believe it was the time before last where we went through the exercise of, raise your right arm, raise your left arm. Everyone could do it. Touch your nose. Everyone could do it. And then I said, raise your soul. Everyone's like, I hope he doesn't call on me. Right? Hold on to your chairs. Don't call on me, Pierce. Don't call on me. Right? Make your spirit flare, that sort of thing. But now, hopefully, you have a better understanding of what the soul and spirit are. Yeah? Can you show me that you got that? Now you're gonna be like, it's gonna call on me. I know it, but can you show me that you got that, right? That you got the lesson on what the soul is, for example. Where does it come from?
The soul comes from the planet.
That's right. It does.
And with
Wait. Did you say the planet or the planets?
planet. Just
Yes.
one.
So it's planets.
Is it planets or the planets?
Planets. All planets.
Ah,
Yes.
all planets. Oh, okay.
The Earth primarily contributes our physical body and the chamber in which the soul can appear. Yeah. The sun contributes our spirit, right? And the other five aspects having to do with like, Moon and Mars and Mercury and Venus, and Jupiter, Saturn, yeah, all of these combine in to help generate the soul. This is where you get astrology from, for example. The astrological aspect of a person, what's your rising sign, what's your, yeah, all these sorts of things. Where does the moon sit on your chart? Astrology is nothing more than trying to describe the nature of a person's soul. It's much more complicated, isn't it? If you've ever gotten into astrology, you'll realize it's much more complicated, than saying I'm an Aries or I'm a Capricorn or whatever the case might be. It's like the ingredients to making a cake, isn't it? Or something even more extraordinary than a cake, probably, from an ingredient standpoint. But that's the idea. It's how you get a soul. And really, the soul, as it shows up from a creational standpoint, or I should say from a planetary standpoint, is mostly to do with frequencies of what you're either prone to or averse to, adverse to, averse. Someone correct me, which is the right word there. I think averse because it's aversion, yes? So pronenesses and aversions. Basically, that's what it is. The hereditary aspect of you comes from the body. They did a really interesting experiment. They did it with mice, as they generally seem to do with experiments. But they trained mom and dad mice to run through a maze. Okay. And, they taught them with cheese and showed them how to get there and all that type of stuff. And then their babies, the baby mice, they did an experiment with them, and they could consistently run through that maze at about the same speed as the parents could, without ever having been shown by the parent mice, faster than mice from other generations or other generations of mice whose lineage had never been exposed to that. You see, this is the idea of heredity, where we inherit certain abilities and traits and those types of things, certain propensities in our DNA, really, from our parents and our grandparents and so on and so forth. Certain pronenesses and those types of things. That's the hereditary aspect of of your constitution. And then the astrological aspect is your soul expression. Yeah. Okay. Good. Now we get to the spirit. Where do we say the spirit comes from?
The sun.
Yeah, it's the sun, solar aspect. All right. Now, who is quick enough right now to see where I'm going with this? We talked about the lower half of things, right? Where you've got snake and bull. Constituting the physical body. Yeah. Upper half has to do with the electrical realms. All right. And so the lion is a representation of the soul. And the eagle, the spirit. All right. Now, where you need to go with this is start looking at that like the cathedrals and art, and those kinds of things, headdresses from ancient times, because you will definitely see, especially around royalty, you'll see these symbols of the lion and the eagle. They show up all the time around, royal, like royal crests and all this type of stuff, don't they? The eagle being the higher aspect of the spirit, one of the most common, pardon me about that. One of the most common symbols that you'll see is the eagle grasping the serpent, don't you? You ever see that? Where the eagle has the serpent in its talons?
Yeah.
That has to do with the idea of the higher, in this case, the spirit, subjugating the lower, right? Subjugating that aspect of the physical realms of things. You also get the imagery over and over and over again of the lion with the bull in its clutches, same symbol. And so you've got the eagle clutching the serpent, the lion clutching or having captured the bull and holding it down. You never see it the other way, do you? You never see the bull, with his hoof on a lion. And, so these are representations of the higher and lower aspects of something. Eh? I'm going to pause, just let you kind of soak in this for a minute. Any questions on this so far? Okay. Let's talk. You get it though, right? You're starting to see kind of where the symbols come from. It's not just bull, bird, lion, and serpent anymore. It has to do with the aspects in you of this higher spiritual aspect having control over the lower aspects. And one of the interesting things that begins to happen in a personal development journey, when you start off, the physical body kind of has dominance and control over the soul and the spirit. All right. The physical body, like people, this is why we have certain exercises to work on training the moving center to be obedient to the brain life, for example. Eventually, the moving center or the body becomes obedient to to something higher, right? The soul, and eventually then the spirit. And so the spirit, as you develop, becomes the in charge of or the master of the soul, and the soul is the master of the body. And you get this in various parables in the Bible, right? Where they say, the master goes away on a journey, and he leaves someone in charge of all of his possessions. Now, this is the idea of this kind of temporary master that starts to take place. And the master returns and sees how they've done with it, how the surrogate or interim masters have done with things. This is exactly the parable about letting the brain control the moving center, and instead of the other way around, which is generally what happens. Yeah? You decide to go on a diet or something like that, and that's really your brain that's saying that, because it has the logic, it has the reasoning to be able to say, you need to eat more healthy and whatever, lose weight or whatever the case might be, right? Get more veggies or something in there. The moving center goes, to hell with that. I want to, I just want to, I just want to eat and have my sugar and have all this other kind of stuff in there, despite what the brain is saying from a logical and reasonable standpoint, that a balanced diet, the right proportions, is more sustaining to life. And it's a very real world example of how people's moving centers go on, isn't it? So that's the switch. That's the switch over. And this is why we say, let your reason control your body. Okay, that's one of the first personal development aspects, letting your reason control the body, as opposed to the body controlling reason. But the brain is only a surrogate, isn't it, for the soul. Eventually, when the master returns, soul makes its appearance as a dominating force in your life, also known as the astral body, right? Because astral means stars. That's what they called the planets back then. Now we have the difference between stars and planets. But for them, astro just meant everything up there, minus the sun, I should say. Uh, but so the soul is basically the coat for the astral body. Once you have an astral body, then the master appears and is able to have dominance and control over the physical body with various things. Once the spiritual aspect appears, then it can have that dominance and control over the soul and the body. So it's kind of, you see the kind of reversal that takes place, right? Where start off going this way, where the body controls the soul and the soul controls the spirit, to a reversal of that. Spirit controls the soul and soul controls the body. So the real question is how you get there. Have you heard the terms gold rod and silver chalice? Okay. You will today, Enzi. Definitely will. Hannah, what does the gold rod refer to?
Yeah, I've heard of the words, but I'm not too sure.
Okay,
I'm
that's fair.
Yeah, but it might be the spine.
Let me grab this eraser here. I won't make the mistake I did last time of giving myself a board that's all wet and can't do anything. Here's a curio for you. Do you know what spine anagrams to? Anagrams is where you switch all the letters around to create a new word, yeah? It's a groundworking tool. Sometimes it'll reveal what's in something because each letter or I should say each consonant and each vowel has a frequency that goes with it. So if you can rearrange the consonants and vowels and come up with a different word, you're going to begin to find relationships because they share similar frequencies. It's almost like astrology in that standpoint. It really is. You get the word spine. Yeah, spine. And it's got the frequency of the letter S and the frequency of P and I and E all in there. That is the astrological expression, if you will, of the word spine. But there's another word. Did you find it yet, Hannah? I saw you jotting letters down.
I've got pines, Pines.
All right. So pines having to do with the pineal gland. What else is in there? And really, you'll see why in a moment. But it does have to do with pines. How about penis?
Ah, yes.
It's right there. Yeah. And now we're coming full circle, aren't we, ladies and gentlemen? Because we talked about the sperm being the lower aspect of the snake and the eagle. I'm sorry, the snake having to do with the sperm because they have a similar kind of shape, yeah? And the eagle having to do with more of the spiritual aspect of something. And now we get this idea of the spine in here. Hopefully your spine doesn't look like that. I think I put a little too many curves in there. It's unintentional, scoliosis kind of thing. But you get the idea, right? It's a rod. What do we know about rods, right? Just like we understand the idea of the uterus and the penis, right? One is a rod which projects something. The other is a cup or a holding place that receives something. And so you've got this male and female aspect of the law of two going on there. Rods transmit, and cups or bowls or any kind of shape that's circular like that is a receiver of something. And we have the added aspect of the spine, which goes up into the head. You see, it's a different kind of impregnation. And in kind of the terminology, which we can go into where it comes from at another point in time, but the spine is the gold rod. And the head is the silver chalice. And the reason why it's called that, again, has to do with symbology. Here's the chalice, yeah? And you understand that you've got here the neck up into the head where you've got the eyes, and that sort of thing in there. This is your silver chalice. This is what the knights were looking for, to be able to acquire the silver chalice. This was one of the permissions, if you will, at least in the context of how I generally use the term, that was opened up 2,000 years ago. This idea of being able to activate the silver chalice. Yeah. And then the way that happens is the spine, just like the penis, begins to radiate upward and impregnate the brain, impregnate the pineal gland as a first line, I should say. So we've got now the higher aspect of things. The soul lives in the spine, and you've probably heard that before. Hannah, have you? It's been kind of one of these expressions, in the Emin. The soul itself lives in the spine, but more than likely, no one could explain why. Yeah, and this is the idea behind it. Okay, but it's this impregnation in there. Now we can talk about things like Kundalini. Gurdjieff used to say, and the Eamon does too, that the practice of Kundalini, which is awakening that serpent power in the spine, can be a very dangerous practice. And I'll use the words can be as opposed to are. Because generally what happens is a person is exposed to a particular discipline like that, and they're not ready for it, is the best way to put it. Because when a person is ready for it, when their development level demands that type of expression or that type of practice, it will begin to happen automatically. It's part of the natural systems of the human complex. Your spine will begin to charge and push energy up into the brain, up into the skull. Yeah? And that's the gold rod level of development, which, by the way, came from Buddhism and in certain aspects of Hinduism, which is why we talk about Buddhism being a gold-based religion, whereas Christianity is a silver-based religion. See, I'm trying to thread all of these types of things together so that you get where these terms and where these ideas came from, that it comes from a understanding of the law of four. And so what happens is you get this spirit and soul aspect coming together and being able to do things with them, just like you can do things with your physical body. Having just an astral body alone is rare. I'll say that, very rare. I've toyed with this. I don't know how many people on the planet, but I would venture it's 100 or under actually have an astral body, or they can do things with it. All these crackpots that write books, you can tell that they don't. But anyway, what happens here, just like when the sperm impregnates the egg, is that force transmitted up the spine begins to activate the pineal gland. And what happens then is you get this radiation coming out of the pineal gland. You begin to glow, have this activity going on in the head that wasn't there before. Now the brain can step aside as the interim master, if you want to go back to the analogies and biblical analogies. But the brain can step aside and let this new spiritual process become the master, like the master returning, to be able to direct things as it sees fit. All right. So We've covered the law of four. We've covered air, earth, water, fire, hot, cold, wet, dry. Then we've gone into the bull, bird, lion, and serpent. We've gone into the symbology of transmissive and receptive of the sperm and the egg. We've gone into the realms of art with the lion holding the bull or the ox, and the eagle grasping the serpent. And it goes into other areas as well. I can add this to it. I'm just going to give you a bunch of aggregation so that you can go and begin to look for it. But draw the same symbol again. Okay, for the bull in here, but this time replacing the human head in that idea. Okay, so the head is the receiver of this. And what happens if you can see electrically, if you can see what's in a person's aura, when this begins to happen, you get these horn-like projections coming out. And if you look at ancient art, specifically to do with Christianity, you'll see that Moses is often displayed with horns. You think, oh, how strange, right? Because in our modern times, we think of only the devil has horns. Yeah. So why would Moses have horns? It's very strange, isn't it? But that's not what it was referring to. It's referring to this beginning of this activation of this kind of radiation that happens. And I'm not kidding, right? If you see someone who's got this silver chalice level of development happening, you'll begin to see these kind of projections coming out. That's the start of it. Eventually, looks more like antlers, like a deer or something would have, but that's as it activates more. Really, you can see it electrically. We'll go through the idea of how to do electrical vision. I think you all worked on it, didn't you, privately? Didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Good. Were you able to do it? Kind of at least see the etheric, or did you see the full?
We did it with a plant, and we
Yeah.
could see a little glow around the plant.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have that experience too, Enzi?
Yeah, we did it together. And yeah, I've tried to replicate it. I haven't been able, actually, but when we did it together, it worked.
Yeah. Well, there's certain basic things that you want to watch out for if you want to continue to practice it. And I love that you have tried to continue to replicate it. But the easiest thing to do is to develop what's called the long view. If the long view is, instead of looking at an object and trying to see the etheric around it, look through it, almost like you're looking a million miles away, and just let your peripheral vision see the edge of whatever it is that you're looking at, but look a long ways away. Okay, and then it becomes much easier to see. Certain backdrops that don't have a lot of busy patterns, like yours right now, NZ, this white backdrop is conducive to being able to do it. So is a black backdrop.
Also,
Never been able to see him. Say that again.
Also, if the lights are dimmed as well, if it's
Yeah, that's a good thing as well. One thing I would say when you're practicing things like that, if you have any sort of success whatsoever, confirm it to yourself. When you say something like, "That's what I want. I want more of that." Okay, confirm it in yourself so that your other parts that aren't always necessarily tuned into your overall desires or overall wishes from a development standpoint hear it. You can also do one other thing too, is create a link in yourself. And so I'm not going to do it with my right hand because it's all covered in chalk, but when something like that happens, pick something like, just give your ear a little touch. Give your ear a little touch every time it happens. And then eventually if you've done this consistently over a dozen or so times, give your ear a little touch and it begins to switch on. See, and then you have this kind of control over when it's switched on, when it's not. And eventually you can do away with that altogether and just demand that it's on. Really. Yeah. Especially when the pineal gland switches on, you can create a ray, right, that comes out of the forehead that will ignite or light up the electrics around something. Kind of tends to follow the eyes as well. All right. Because we only had two other people aside from myself today, I try and limit things to seven. All right, seven aspects of something to keep from overloading. But we've talked about all seven things. So now I'm going to put it in your court. If you want to keep me, then ask some questions. Let's try and open things up. Or if it's just like, and you're good to go, then that's fine too. 45-minute run.
I've just got a little question. When you were talking about raising the Kundalini,
Yeah.
how do they do that? I'm just curious.
Right.
How
So,
they
yeah, the general process of it, if a person isn't like ready and it just starts to happen naturally, is they will use certain breathing exercises and they will use certain focus exercises, or I should say perception exercises, to start at the base of the spine and mentally and through breath force it up through each of the chakras. And it tends to get stuck at each of the chakras, yeah, or each of these kind of energy centers throughout the spine. And they just keep the pressure going, keep pushing through until it raises up to the next one, the next one. And that's the basic understanding of it. For a more esoteric understanding of it, you can go back to previous lessons where we talked about the three foods, about physical food. And they do actually often control their diet when they're doing this sort of thing too, like no meat, that sort of thing. By the way, it's not a requirement, but it can be helpful in that aspect of things, especially if a person isn't generally ready for this, but they need that their energy a bit more light and buoyant. Meat tends to bring your energy into a heavier level, which is awesome. Okay. Um, but then we have breath being the second one, and impressions being the third type of food. And so you see that a lot of these spiritual traditions that are trying to develop the aspect of the gold rod, which anagrams to Lord God, but developing the aspect of the gold rod, will do so through the use of the three foods. They'll modify their diet. They'll adopt certain breathing exercises so that it's just like, breath is just like eating. You see, if you breathe in certain ways, it's like eating different kinds of food. They have rapid breathing, they have slow breathing, they have nostril breathing, right, where they just do one or the other type of thing. They've got the slow inhale and hold and slow exhale and hold at the top. These are all the equivalent of eating different types of foods to be able to enhance that journey. Okay. And so, yeah, they use primarily the second two foods, although the first one's involved in it, to begin to pump and try and pump the spiraling snake-like. That's how they depict it, don't they? Two snakes curling up the spine. Yeah. Ida and Pingala. I can't remember what it is, but I think it's something like that. Yeah. But they try and push and force and pump past these chakras, and it can and does get to the head, in which point in time they achieve that idea of nirvana. But the problem is that sometimes other things are left behind, and so you'll see like in many cases it leaves the person physically frail because it's taking energy away from other aspects, whereas they should have this overall vitality in themselves. It's one of the signs that it wasn't done right. If a person's physical body is a complete wreck, or if they A lot of times what I've seen too is they lack a vitality of the mind, right? They might have this radiation going on, but you can barely communicate with them. They just seem kind of checked out mentally. You shouldn't have to. If you do it the right way, you shouldn't have to be completely in another realm. People think it's a good thing. Oh, that man or lady is, they're so spiritual that you can't even talk to them. Right? They're living in nirvana or satori or these types of things. Not necessary. Really, it's not. I mean, when you have a fully developed astral form, astral body, it can stand beside you. And if we're in the same room, it can have a conversation with your astral content that you're not even aware of. So you could be getting instruction on 2 or maybe 3 levels. You've got that spiritual body or what's called the mental body. Or the causal, which is when the two converge. Causal body. There's a third body. Sometimes it's been referred to as the sexual body because it's a union of the soul and spirit. It's the baby of the soul and spirit once they've fully developed, just like a man and woman fully develop and mature into the childbearing age of adulthood. The soul and spirit can mature into the childbearing age of adulthood for them and produce a third between them, which is causal or the sexual body. So it doesn't end there, does it? All right, Hannah, did that answer your question?
It did, yes. The other question was with the silver chalice, with it being a container. So is that a container for the baby, or is there something else that it contains? I don't know.
It is. It is the womb, I should say, of that third entity that can manifest from there.
Right, yeah.
And if you want to go into the idea of, see, you're going to start to see that once you get the basics going for yourself, it all ties together. Have you been told how a baby gets an aura? Or you? Have you been told how you got an aura? All right.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I won't go into the ideas of when when it goes from embryo, which anagrams to my robe, to a fetus, which anagrams, if you spell it the old English way, anagrams to fuse. Okay, very, very interesting, right? But the my robe is the body at that point, and the fetus to fuse is when something higher, like the soul and spirit, come in and fuse itself into the body, fetus and embryo. I won't go into the timing of that, but I'll go to the point just after the to fuse aspect happens. In other words, when the soul and spirit come into the embryo, it begins to radiate. And you see this in the look of the mother. You become, as a mother, you become very highly connected in the in the astral light. You have this glow. I mean, people talk about it without any esoteric context whatsoever. Just like, oh, you're glowing, when you're pregnant, don't they? It's because these things are now inhabiting you. You have a soul and spirit, and so does the unborn child within you, has this radiating soul and spirit, fresh out of the mint of creation, if you will, at this point. And so what happens is, because the womb is a brine-like chamber, all right, when you're pregnant, and it's filled with a kind of a saline type of fluid in there, then the fetus inside begins to radiate outward and outward and outward because of what the content is within it, the soul and spirit life in it. But it can't get quite so far. It gets, for the most part, contained in here, in the womb, and begins to stack up and pack and pack and pack. Okay. And so it becomes very, very strong. Some of it gets out, and this is what allows the lady to radiate. Most of it comes through the blood, though, which, by the way, is the housing of the astral body. Your astral content lives in your blood. until such point as it becomes just too potent. Okay, too much radiation in there, and this is where it can no longer contain. You can no longer contain as a lady, right? And what happens is the water breaks, yeah, and now you have the full force, the full exposure of another entity inside your own aura. That other entity isn't you, it's its own entity. So your body, as a process, begins to reject it. Not reject it like in an emotional way, but just like any kind of foreign body, it begins a rejection process. And this is what causes the birth to happen. Okay. Now, why do you have an edge to your aura? Because Enzi, if you practiced with the plant, actually both of you, if you practiced with a plant, for example, you might have noticed that it just kind of fades off. It never actually has an edge to it. It just gets less and less radiating as the further away that you get to it. But if you look at a human and their aura, they have a distinct auric sheath, distinct sheath around the aura. And the reason is really quite simple. Plants, to a degree, have a soul. What I mean by that is like this one in particular is primarily loaded with Jupiterian force, Jupiter force. All right, this particular one. You can tell because of its color. It's primarily got Jupiter as its main planetary aspect. It does have soul, but the most of its soul comes from the Earth itself, the planet herself. All right, and so they're not as complex as we are. They don't get all 7 signals from the various planets, but they can get 1 or 2. And the ones that have, well, they can even get like 3. The ones that have 3 are generally some sort of narcotic, because at that point in time, they begin to have so much external radiation that if you consume it in some way or another, it can have an effect on you. Yeah, it's higher. Regardless, what inhabits the human, so what inhabits a plant is not solar. Okay, it collects solar radiation, and you can definitely see it with things like sunflowers that actually follow the sun through the sky throughout the day. They're receiving it and collecting it, but they are not it in and of themselves. They do that on behalf of the planet. They receive something on behalf of the planet. Humans have a solar aspect in us and a star level aspect in us. All stars, I mean, not just our sun. We have that aspect to us. And so in a planetary ecology, we are more rarefied than everything else around us, including the planet herself. We contain something that's more rarefied. The best example I can give is that of a bubble trapped in water somehow. And if you put like something in water that'll keep the bubbles from coming up and out, you'll notice that it's contained, right? You've got a glass of water, something, water in here, something blocking it, and you might get this little bubble form in there. It has a sheath because it is more rarefied than the water around it. This is the reason why humans have a definite stop to where their aura is. It's because of the spirit aspect, the solar aspect in us. And someone who has a sun level type of connection, it's like getting more air in that bubble until it becomes, it can become like 50 feet, the aura can. Really big bubble in the context of the ecology of the planet herself. So it's because of what we contain. This is why humans have an outer edge to the aura. If we were just planetary or just all planetary, we wouldn't have it. We'd be like a planetary animal that just radiates. Good question. Keep going for as long as you want to open things up, okay?
Just a quick question. With the baby,
Huh.
because they have the plates on the head, and in the first year that closes up.
Mhm.
So is it that things are still coming in during that first year?
Yes, and also this happens when you go through a process of personal development. Talked about this in the past before, but the top of the head does become soft again. Yeah, begins to. You can actually like feel it. It gets spongy, a little bit spongy. It's not the way a baby's is. A baby is just fully opened, and that is because of this two-way traffic, two-way interchange. Um, and really, actually, it has more to do with the astral light than it does with like a solar kind of connection. Because as a baby is very small in a very big world, they become receptive to all of the astral light in their environment and all the influences and things that are going on, even in the world itself. Don't go into containment until what is it, about a year and a half, I think, is when uh, the, isn't it about that year and a half when those sutures close up?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I always thought it was about a year, but it's yeah.
yeah. But yeah, good reasoning, good add up. Yeah, absolutely right. What else? Good job. Any questions, my friend Enzi?
Mm, yeah, not now.
Okay.
Been a lot of information.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find very interesting about this type of work is the more aggregation you get, the more you learn about things, the more you begin to see this interconnectedness of all of the concepts and all of the ideas and those types of things. Like you can go from one subject to another subject to another subject to another subject very fluidly, a lot of fluidity, because you can go like, okay, and that leads to unwrap a new territory, and that leads to unwrap a new territory. Um, I don't view this work really as a bunch of different subjects. In the beginning, it feels that way. You've got astrology, you've got tarot, you've got the electromagnetic aspects to the human, you've got how the human gets an aura, you've got soul, spirit, body, you've got, I mean, I could list hundreds, couldn't I? Just go on and on and on about the things that you can learn. But
Yeah.
as you aggregate with this type of stuff, it just becomes one thing. I would say its name is the way, really. That's what it becomes. Just all aspects of the way. You've seen this diagram before, haven't you? Of the wheel with the spokes. Yeah, and so you can say this is astrology, and this is tarot, and this is the unseen worlds, and so on and so forth. And the astrology may seem very different, almost diametrically opposed to another aspect of something, numerology kind of thing. Um, that's because that's out on the rim. The word esoteric itself means inner circle. And so the more you aggregate in any one of these lines or multiples of these lines, the closer you get to the esoteric. And then you can begin to see these connections. And when you get to the center, when you become esoteric yourself, they're all the same thing. It's just, well, I know, I mean, you go to a restaurant, don't you? And you don't order what everyone else does. Take 10 friends or something like that to a restaurant, and uh, you don't all go around the table ordering the exact, I'll have what she had, I'll have what he had, type of thing. And every person has their own frequency, the things that attract them. So uh, the one of the difficult aspects of teaching or being an inspirator to a group of people is I can only talk of one thing at a time. Yeah, and it might inspire, Hannah and not so much Enzi, and the next time through it might inspire Enzi and not so much Hannah or Mark, type of thing. But really, all we're doing is looking at various pathways to get into the core of it, into the center. That's the whole point there. And you'd be surprised anyway at the things that you retain from the bits that weren't interesting to you at one point in time. Yeah. Like, well, early on in my journey, on this journey, wasn't really that interested in astrology. couldn't get into it, didn't care about it. Didn't matter to me. Now I see how it connects with everything else, so of course it does. But I got a bunch of lessons on it anyway, and a lot of it stuck. So sometimes what you learn today is not necessarily for your now, but perhaps will be relevant to your future self. All right. What else? I love this space. I love this space with people because don't feel overwhelmed by it. Just appreciate the magnitude of it. That there's just so much learning. Well, we're in lesson 2 of this journey that I decided to take, where I said I'm going to do an Emin with you, a real Emin with you. We're just in week 2 of that. That's what I would do. My suggestion would be to just appreciate the magnitude of things, how much there is in the universe to be able to explore and learn and know. And not just that, but to become. That's the idea of it. You spend enough time learning the law of 4, as an example, you become an embodiment of the law of 4. And what that means, another way of saying that, is that you become a tuning fork to it. So that as you're walking through life in various situations, if something has to do with the law of 4, then it immediately has a resonance with you. You can immediately go, oh, right, that's the law of 4, because you become an embodiment of the law of 4. You then have this tuning fork, this sympathy with other things that are also related to the law of 4. And you're not struggling. You're not reaching for groundwork anymore. You are in tune with it. The same thing with the law of 2 and 5 and 7 and 9 and 6 and all of these types of things. Okay. The other thing that happens too is that so few people these days, so few people on the planet are actually interested in the natural laws, that when you become interested in them and begin to have this type of tuning fork radiation connection to them, you really light up in the astral light, and other things begin to come to you because they're like, oh, what's this little glow happening down there on this, planet on the dark side of the universe? Other things begin to come and attend you so that you can get more of the same. Because I'll tell you, the law of 2 is best friends with the law of 4. If you can't see that, just look at the diagram again. It's just 2 intersections of the law of 2. So if you jump in this way, or you can jump in at the other end, you can jump in at the law of 2. And it will bring along its best friend, which is the law of 4. Just like the law of 3 is best friends with the law of 6. They'll get buddies, don't they? And complementary colors are best friends. And I mean, we can take this everywhere. You understand that? You understand the idea of tuning forks?
Yeah.
You ever been looking for a new car and you've got one in mind? I want to get or maybe you bought a specific car, and you're driving around town, and all of a sudden, that's all you see. You're only seeing like I had no idea there were so many Hondas on the road. That's the tuning fork. It's not that they weren't there before and you just manifested 2 million Hondas, for example. It's because you've got a tuning fork to it and now you see it. Same exact thing happens with the laws. Use that exact same process, just fall in love with it, work it a little bit, and then every law of 4 in your environment that you stumble across in your daily life, and you'll notice it much more with much more ease than you did before. That's the way it works. Have you had that experience? You know what I'm talking about with like a vehicle or?
Yeah, we've had that.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the best analogies on within most people's experience, that's one of the best analogies there are, how to approach a work like this. And interestingly enough, too, speaking of auras, those types of things begin to live in a person's aura. Try and experiment in the coming week. Get a person to talk about something they love and watch where their eyes go. Like as they begin to talk about it, sometimes they'll look up here. Do you know what they're doing in reality? The unseen worlds aspect of things is they're connecting with where they stored that in their aura. We don't have everything expanded in our mind all at once. It would be too much information, too much. I mean, imagine if you were aware of your entire past, present, all at the same time. What we do is we take experiences or we take knowledge and we encapsulate them, collapse them down into something manageable, and then park them somewhere in the aura. And when you want to access that information, you look at it, use your electrical vision. You're not aware that you're doing this, but you use your electrical vision to kind of bloom that out and expand it back into your aura so that you have access to the information at that point. Right? And when you're done with it, goes back in there. But you can see in someone's aura what kind of works that they've done. It's how you can tell if someone has like a healing nature or is very into numerology or very into these various types of things. Is if you've also done it, you can look in their aura and see what kind of content they hold. This is called, in some respects, this is an aspect of what they called coding. Okay, you get coded with certain lessons. Like now, you'll walk away with a little spark of the law of 4 in your aura. You want to access it, figure out where you stored it. Easiest way to figure out where you stored it is to think back on this lesson and watch where you look. Like, what did Pierce say? Wherever you're kind of unconsciously looking, what did Pierce say? That's where you can find it. That's where you can get it. There's a funny thing you can do with that sort of validates this. And it does have to do with whether something was visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. In other words, like feeling. You can verify this on someone who hasn't had this lesson, but ask someone, just please pay attention to me for a moment and say, I want you to think back in time about what color your front door was when you were a child. Yeah, and really try to visualize and remember what that front door looked like. Okay, and as you do that, you watch where their eyes go. Okay, so if they go, right, don't say it. Tell them, don't tell me what color it was. Just remember it, right? And so, if they begin to think and they look up here, then they've got an image of the door. And now ask them. I want you to just try and hear in your mind your favorite music. And generally, you'll see them go somewhere on the horizontal plane because it's more of an auditory thing, more of an emotional thing. But you'll see them go either lower or middle, generally speaking, and go, okay, got it. And then you say, I want you to remember what your first kiss was like. First time you kissed a boy or a girl or whatever it is. And you watch where their eyes go. Usually it's down low because it's a physical, kinesthetic type of thing. And you say, okay, forget all that. Just pick one. Don't tell me what it is. Just pick one and think about it. Try and vivify it. Try and, this type of stuff. And wherever their eyes go, you can look like a mind reader and be like, well, you're thinking about your first kiss. Because if they're, going back to that place, that's where they stored it in their aura, or the color of their front door, or their favorite piece of music, whatever the case is. Really, it works. Try it out. Give it a shot. It actually works. 9 times out of 10. I don't know why the 10th doesn't. So every now and then you'll get someone, or you'll get someone that's trying to trip you up, and they'll just have this dead stare at you because generally they're a bit too paranoid about having their mind read. So they'll try not to give you any clues. played too much poker in their life or something like that. But yeah, give it a shot. It's really interesting. I've done it many times with people. It actually works. It does. Um, and this is the idea of where people store something in their aura around them. Yeah, yeah. Try to validate or invalidate these types of things. And I mean, you could, if you don't believe in auras, that's fine too. You could also just say that the eyes are so connected to the brain that whatever the brain is processing, certain neurological impulses end up radiating out into the optic nerve and the muscles that control the eyes, and whatever they're thinking about will have that same effect. That's fine too, but uh, it doesn't eliminate the fact that they store it somewhere, whether it's in here or out there or whatever the case is. They haven't found the mind, right? You know that? They haven't found the mind. Like scientists can't dissect a brain and be like, there's the mind. And interestingly enough, too, is that many times when someone has to have brain surgery and they have to remove part of their brain, for a time, they're unable to do certain things. Like maybe they, can no longer do something that they used to do, or they lose the ability to speak, or they can't recall certain memories, those types of things. But in many cases, after a certain time of healing and recovery, they get those things back. And the reason why, and they can look at this from a neurological standpoint, is the brain then begins to compensate. And certain parts begin to fulfill the parts that are missing at this point in time. Now, the flaw in that reasoning and logic is this, that if here's your brain, here's where you store language, for example, if that part is removed and no other part had any kind of play in that, then where would it get the information to be able to compensate and bring language back in? It won't rebuild this aspect of the brain, but other parts will begin to take over. It's because it's stored out here and it has access to it. It can then go, okay, I don't quite understand it yet, but I can I can get the connection and begin to learn it and use another part of the brain to process that type of information. But if it wasn't stored somewhere else, you cut a piece of the brain out and it's just gone, isn't it? It's like if you wipe off part of your hard drive, zero it all out and whatnot, then it's gone. Can't go to another part of your hard drive and say, there it is. It's actually not technically true, because usually hard drives will store things all throughout and just interlace them back together. That's beside the point. You get the idea. A cassette tape, how's that? You erase part of a cassette tape and you'll never get that part back. Anything else before we close out? Good things to do, good things to play around with. All right, I'll leave you with a puzzle, bit of a puzzle here. Try and make sense of this. Hot is positive, cold is negative, wet is negative, and dry is positive. Try to make sense of the idea of line being plus plus, bowl being plus minus, snake being minus minus, and eagle being minus minus plus. It's just kind of peculiar the way that the pluses and minuses show up in the diagram. See what you can make of it. It will open up new territories for you about how the law of four works that haven't been explained to you by your inspirator. All right. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you being here. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. See you next time.
Bye.
That's a great meeting. See you. Bye.
Absolutely.